Welcome back, WNST. Dances for the Baltimore Ravens out in Minnesota. I'm going to welcome in a guy here that knows the pathway out there from Edina to Plymouth to downtown Minneapolis and Bloomington. And I'm sure we'll be seeing each other at the Mall of America as we broadcast Super Bowl week from Minnesota. He's going to let me borrow one of his old parkas out there that say Vikings on it. We welcome our head coach on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation, the one, the only Brian Billick back. He is Coach Billick on Twitter. And, that's your second home, right? The Twin Cities and the state of Minnesota, and certainly this is as good a look as they've had out there in quite some time. A lot of enthusiasm out there, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, they're great fans out there. It's a great area. I have not been in the stadium. I've been around it, so I'm anxious to see it. It's something they're very proud of. They got a good football team, as Ravens fans saw. I mean, that defense for real. The offense is better than it's been, even all but a Case Keenum. This is an interesting team, so there's no shame in losing to a good football team in Minnesota. And they're in a division now, obviously, minus an Aaron Rodgers that clearly, for my money, makes them the clear favorite to win that division.
All right, well, you say that Case Keenum, albeit Case Keenum, is the way what do you make of him? I mean, is he good enough to get them to 11 wins? I mean, clearly week after week he's gone out there and quote-unquote game managed this thing, but that defense is going to be what sets the tone, and it certainly is what set the tone on Sunday. The Ravens offense, you just had a feeling they could play all day and they weren't going to get a touchdown. They got one at garbage time, I mean, at the absolute last second of the clock, but it just felt like the Ravens were in quicksand all day offensively for all sorts of reasons, and we'll go through them all, but that Vikings defense looks like it's going to travel.
Absolutely, and as good defenses do. They're a better all-around team. Now, no, can Case Keenum win a championship? No, in my opinion, he can't. At some point, a player like, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but the players at that level, the more games you play, at some point you get exposed as to why you're that backup player. But an interim player, now whether it's a Sam Bradford comes back or a Teddy Bridgewater, and that remains to see whether they can be a championship-level quarterback. But as a complete team, yeah, they're pretty darn good. In an NFC right now, and I think that's the qualifier, in the NFC, short of, and we'll see how the game, how it plays out, but who's that dominant team that's any better than they are, really? I mean, we're seeing the works on Atlanta now. Certainly, Philadelphia and Washington show some potential. Dallas is beginning to get a little steam. But I don't know there's that team in the NFC that you're going to go, oh, absolutely. No, this now becomes the prohibitive favorite to go to the playoffs and go to the Super Bowl.
Now, you were doing the Ravens games in the preseason. You saw what Ozzie wanted to do. I'm sure you spent a lot of time with John on what the plan was going to be and how it was going to work out. And then I guess much like the Mike Tyson fight, everyone has a plan. Do they get punched in the mouth, right? And in the Ravens case, it's been 20 guys now. They're walking out there with a team that, quite frankly, wouldn't even be much of a representative team in a lot of cases during the preseason, certainly not the wide receiving core. No one's going to take pity. No one's going to feel sorry. But, I do see this week after week, and I see the coach getting shot at and the quarterback getting shot at. Then I look and I say, well, where are the players? I mean, what do you expect when you're running around with Michael Campanaro, Chris Moore, and a street free agent named Griff Whalen that you brought in on Wednesday?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, and I've always joked about it before, that when I was doing games for Fox and you'd go in to sit down with coaches and under similar circumstances and talk about, that are beat up or they're young, and the first thing the coach says, well, we don't use that excuse. We don't talk about being injured or young. And then they spend the next 45 minutes telling you how young and beat up they are. It's human nature. You're not going to give yourself over to that, but that's a fact of life. You can't look at the injuries pragmatically. I'm not talking about emotionally, and this is life in the National Football League. I mean, again, I don't mean to bring it back to my personal circumstances, but, I lived it. On a year after going 13-3, we come back, we lose starting quarterback, backup quarterback, 3/5 of the offensive line, including Jonathan Ogden, Ray Lewis, and Ed Reed. And so you can look and say, well, yeah, that's how you get to be 5-11. And it's at the end of the year, it's, well, we don't care. We need to do something else. And that's not going to happen to John Harbaugh. I just firmly believe that Steve Bisciotti believes in John and looks at this and goes, okay, yeah, I don't know what our expectations are. Now, do you need to look at bigger questions? I mean, anytime you look at a trade or free agency pickup. You can't say, oh, well, this guy got hurt, so it was a bad pickup. Well, you don't know that unless there's a history of it. Now, Jeremy Maclin is one that, yeah, when they took him, I'm sure they factored in, well, this has been a little bit problematic, so that certainly is part of it. The drafting of the Ravens has been well documented. They loaded up on defense, and I am shocked, notwithstanding, because, most of the injuries have been on the offensive side. I'm shocked of all the things of how people are running on the Ravens defense, having watched that during the preseason. And I understand that they're now just getting Williams back, and they lost Brent Urban. But it's tough when you look at a guy like Latavius Murray, crank off more than 100 yards. His highest game prior to that was 28 yards rushing. And obviously the injuries in the interior of the defense for the Ravens is having a big effect, because when a team can run on you, that's the most difficult thing to deal with, because of not only what they're physically doing, but emotionally what that does to your team, particularly a prideful defense like the Ravens.
Well, in the middle of this secondary, they've tried to improve since Ed Reed, right? I mean, they've had a mess back there with Darian Stewart, Michael Huff, and all these other names that Lewis and these guys they've brought in. The Jefferson pickup was supposed to be the salve for this, right? And certainly Weddle played better last year. I don't know what's going on in the middle of the field from the safety perspective. I think the corners have been right. They certainly have not had the kind of pass rush, and didn't have the kind of pass rush against Case Keenum that they had in weeks 1 and week 2 when they were taking the ball away because of that. But the middle and the safety position here, that was supposed to be the strength of the team, and it just hasn't been so far.
No, and again, is it better? Notwithstanding Weddle not playing as well. That's hard to say. I mean, it's all relative. You can be better, but maybe not great. And I don't think you can discount the difficulties at the safety position from what's going on in the front seven in terms of the ability. I mean, when all of a sudden now, the anchor of any great defense was ours. Was in their second Super Bowl. It has been over the last couple of years. Your ability to stuff the run with what's called a standard spacing front. That means you don't have to add the safeties in. You can, but you don't have to. That gives you a lot of latitude on the back end. Well, that appears to be part of the problem. They can't stop the run with just a standard spacing front. They have to add the extra guy into the numbers. They have to be more creative. And that also leaves yourself open now for big plays. When you're stunting and looping and doing those things to disrupt the run, all of a sudden you find there's a gap that if they happen to hit this just right, it turns into a big gash. And I think we saw that in the Pittsburgh game. And so they are connected in terms of the play you're going to get from the safeties.
He is our head coach on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation. You can reach him at Coach Billick out on Twitter. This segment brought to you by Lee Tessier and his team at Keller Williams, American Premier Realty up there in Hartford County. List your house with Lee Tessier and risk nothing. His team's going to get your house sold. You can find him at leetessier.com. Also, big shout out to our friends over Costas Inn. Good enough for the Today Show, good enough for my mom, and certainly good enough for my Dundalk High Hall of Fame induction on Friday night. We had a great night over there with Nick and Pete. Fat Crabs, Cold Beer, the legend continues. Find them at CostasInn.com. Coach, now the Ravens get this short rest. The Dolphins are coming in. We're seeing other quarterbacks drop. Cutler's now not there. It wouldn't shock me to see them hold serve and play a sloppy game on Thursday night and find a way to win and get back to 4-4. But there's got to be some home cooking and a feel-good here about a 3-day turnaround that they got to get this together on Thursday night and sort of right this thing before they take the long weekend off at Halloween.
Yeah, beyond now, and the Dolphins sitting here at 4-2, I think are maybe a bit of a surprise, particularly given the transition. From the look of it, they're better off with Matt Moore than they are Jay Cutler. So I don't know that not having Jay Cutler is something to hang your hat on necessarily. But I think the Ravens match up very well with the Dolphins. Sometimes it's just teams you match up. This Dolphin offense is kind of a mess in terms of their inability to run the ball. They're not good on third down. This matchup should be very good. They're not running the ball great right now. We just talked about the Ravens kind of being run on. It's hard for me to imagine Matt Moore generating a lot of offense in order to beat the Ravens. Now, that Miami defense is not bad. And so that's going to be the challenge, again, with the Ravens offense and, Joe Flacco kind of struggling, and for a lot of good reasons. I mean, he's got a cast around him that there's not a lot there, whether it be in the running game, offense. I mean, across the board. Injury at the running back, injury at the offensive line, across the board. So this defense, you'd have thought in a game of field goals that would favor the Ravens, but obviously Minnesota at home were able to do something special. I can see this coming down to a field goal, and if that's the case, Tucker obviously should be the difference in the game.
Let's get around the league here a little bit, and you mentioned no dominant team out there, but a couple of teams have gone sort of by the wayside. I mean, I'm kind of shocked the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 2-4 right now. I'm shocked that the Cardinals are kind of underwater and now have a banged up Carson Palmer, that their season has kind of gone the other way. And then the LA Chargers or whatever I don't want to call them the San Diego Chargers. They sort of willed their way back into this thing. There's some of these 3-4 teams that feel like they're coming a little bit. In the Jacksonville Jaguars are another team that they can go out any week and put 40 points on you somehow, right?
Yeah, what did we say? We said by the time we get to the end of the second quarter of the season, and we're closing in on that, that we'd really know. I mean, you can chase fool's gold in certain teams and how they look early, and you think this, you think that, and then you get into the second quarter of the season, and teams, you are kind of what your record says you are, and it's like we just talked about the quarterback. Yeah, you can look good for a game or two, but if you're that level guy, it's going to catch up with you over 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 16 games. And so we're beginning to see that. And you're right. I mean, as you look at it, one of the surprise teams is Tampa Bay. Now, you can go back to Jameis Winston, and his progression is obviously going to be a key. And then you look at a team like the Green Bay Packers, where it's obvious when you lose an Aaron Rodgers, that changes. So the injuries aside, the team that have these kind of injuries, you go, well, it's not hard to understand why they're struggling. But you look at the good teams, I think Minnesota falls in that category, even though they've weathered losing the quarterback. The Los Angeles Rams are very much a real team because of all three phases. They may be as good as anybody in the National Football League in all three phases. Not dominant. Defense is good. Offense is showing to be very good. Special teams. Our friend John Fossil, best special teams coach in the NFL. They've got all three phases. Seattle just kind of is hanging there, in the NFC because they're really not really consistent offensively. I'm going to do a piece on NFL Playbook this week about, they're just all about really good defense, but they come up with the big plays. They really can't run the ball consistently. They're inconsistent in their passing game. But what we've also seen now on the other end, teams like Carolina, Atlanta, you talk about Tampa Bay in that division. Well, the best team right now looks like New Orleans. Who'd have thought that with that defense, which is better. But I think you could throw Carolina, Atlanta, and Tampa all in that same category where we thought that was going to be the best division in football. It's turning out that it is not. In the AFC, the Patriots, after that first loss, it's amazing. It's hard to think of the New England Patriots as being under the radar, but they have been, and now Kansas City losing 2 in a row. The Pittsburgh Steelers, based on what we saw this last weekend, we've always thought Pittsburgh could be very, very good. And we also know they're a little schizophrenic. Losing to Jacksonville isn't as shameful as we thought it was because Jacksonville looks to be pretty good. But if the Pittsburgh Steelers can maintain what they did last weekend, and that defense in particular, then they may easily be the best team in the AFC. Now, typical Pittsburgh, can they sustain it? Now they're apt to step up the next week and just give us one of those, where did that come from kind of game. New England looks to be kind of getting its stride. Still a few issues offensively, or defensively rather. They're a different team. They're all about big plays. So the teams at the top end, I think, are kind of solidifying themselves. It's a scramble at that next level, and that's where the Ravens fans should hold on. Like I said, 8-8, 9-7 may win a division. You get in that scramble for the wild card division, so to speak. Let's say in current form, it holds full. Pittsburgh in the north, Kansas City in the west, New England in the east, and Tennessee in the south. Okay, now you're talking about the Ravens competing with the Bills, Miami, who they're going to play this week, Jacksonville, Denver, who's struggling, Houston. That's a group you can keep up with.
Well, 9-7 feels like it's going to get a flag at the bottom end of it, right? I mean, it almost feels like some of these teams are probably incapable of winning 10. I can't imagine the Buffalo Bills winning 10 games right now. Can you?
No, and when I say 9, I would have said, even the AFC North, the way Baltimore and Pittsburgh were kind of going at it a couple of weeks ago. Now, Pittsburgh looks stronger than that. But I could definitely see in the AFC South with Tennessee and Indianapolis was just a mess right now, and everything in Jacksonville, although Jacksonville's playing better, I could see a 9-7, an 8-8 winning that division.
He is our head coach on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation. He is Brian Billick and Coach Billick out on Twitter. His picture's on the wall up at G&A. Coney Island Hot Dog in Highlandtown, the best hot dogs in the world. You can find them at GNARestaurant.com. Also want to give a shout-out to our friends at Coppin State University. Just signed a deal there. We are the home for Eagles basketball all winter, and the Juan Dixon Show is going to appear here beginning this week. You can learn more at CoppinStateSports.com. Coach, just sort of globally going out to Minnesota, and Matt Burke takes the field and says he wants to see everyone standing and kneeling, and are we getting toward the end of that? I mean, it felt like it wasn't as big a deal this weekend, and that somehow, some way, the league, the Players Association, has more of a handle on it because it's not buzzing on a Monday the way it has been the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think because those conversations are going on to the point where the players are going to become more and more comfortable that the league does want to be a partner in this. And the league is taking the approach saying, look, we don't like this. We respect and understand and support what it is you're trying to do. Let's find a different forum for it. Let us help you. I love the fact that some of the teams now are spending their energies focusing on working with local police departments, raising funds, creating interaction between the police and the players to try to open that dialogue to help them address the issue rather than, the whole idea of this was to bring attention to it. Okay, great. If you've done that, then the next step is, okay, what's actionable? What's next? And it seems like we may be there. So if that's the case, and then it could be a good thing, and if that's a league initiative that goes across the NFL, then I think we will see less and less of this, because at the end of that day, I don't think the players really want to be disrespectful to the flag or to the country. I think they feel passionate about what they were protesting against and didn't fully appreciate the impact that it was going to have in that regard, and therefore now I think they're looking for an exit strategy as well.
He is Coach Billick out on Twitter, and our head coach on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation. Always good to visit with you. I wish it were better news for our guys in purple. Certainly Thursday night, man, I don't know what we were expecting here, but just trying to survive it and get the 4-4. We'll get back after it with you next week. Thanks for coming on, Coach.
Sounds great.
Always our best. He is Coach Billick out on Twitter. And, of course, on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation, you can learn more there at livingclassrooms.org about all the cool stuff. We talk about police and community and trying to help the city. No one does more for the city than Living Classrooms Foundation. You can find me out on the buyatoyota.com Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you happen to be. And, of course, our morning newspaper ships digitally to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. That's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, guaranteed. Last but never least, man, we have breaking news around here, and a lot of times when it's breaking news, especially in a game, it's, Mike Wallace will not return concussion, but certainly we're getting guys back. The good news is we got Brandon Williams back over the weekend. We're trying to get some guys back out onto the field on Thursday night. If there is any breaking news, you will get that first on our WNST tech service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday, driving you home from 3 until 5, getting you ready for the Dolphins. It is game time on Thursday. We'll be here with full postgame on Friday as well. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.